Battlefield 2042 remains among the most spectacularly disastrous AAA game launches in recent memory. Even by Battlefield standards, which has had an up and down rocky history, 2042 really stands out due to its myriad technical and design issues that has made it garner one of the worst meta scores for EA AAA releases. And as far as the user score goes, you can see right here that even today it still stands as among the lowest rated games on Metacritic. And you can see that this is a sentiment that's felt pretty universally. Even on Google, you'll find user ratings that are sitting at 1.9 stars out of 5. And to the left here, you can see that Steam's reviews are not faring any better either. And that 5 out of 10 rating is actually more recent reviews. If you look at overall reviews, you can see that it's sitting at mostly negative, 31% from 117,000 reviews versus the mixed reviews of 42% from the recent 2053 reviews, which is really not that much higher from 31%. And the thing is that when a game does start getting better over time, there is the chance for the user score to see some kind of comeback like Cyberpunk 2077 did. Recent reviews have been very positive, almost 90%, and now the overall review score has changed to mostly positive and is almost reaching the 80% mark. So you can see that community sentiment can change when a game does make huge strides over time, but Battlefield 2042, despite it having been, how long now since launch? It launched in November 2021. It's been a year now. And even now, the game has incredibly negative optics surrounding it. So much so, in fact, that the player base for the game is significantly less than older Battlefield entries by a margin that I don't know if this is like normal for a sequel to see this many fewer players than the older entries. Battlefield 2042 right now, in terms of 24-hour peak, we're seeing sort of an average of 5,000, a little over 5,000 players. Now look at what's going on with Battlefield 1 here. The 24-hour peak, and this is a screenshot from today, the recent 24-hour peak is sitting at over 50,000 players, and over the last hour, over 18,000 players. In case you forgot, Battlefield 1 launched back in 2016, whereas Battlefield 2042 launched in 2021. We're talking about a game that's 5 years older than the most recent entry, and yet the most recent entry is so bad that few will bother checking it out versus the much older entry here, 10 times the players. This feels rather unprecedented, and I don't recall a situation where something like this has happened to this degree. And it's not just Battlefield 1 that has more players. Battlefield 5 has a 24-hour peak right now of over 13,000 players versus Battlefield 2042's 5,000 players. So even Battlefield 5, which is among the rougher launch Battlefield games, but still better than 2042 in that respect, has roughly 2 to 3 times the players of 2042. If that doesn't give you an idea for just how roughly Battlefield 2042 was launched, I don't know what does. And I'm not going to go through all of the issues surrounding Battlefield 2042. If you go to my channel and search for 2042 videos, you'll find everything. There's so much that's impossible to just summarize everything, but it is very much a combination of design issues, the fact that they went with specialists instead of classes, which just ruined the whole experience for a lot of people who play Battlefield for that traditional format of classes. There's also the way they doubled the number of players for certain modes from 64 to 128 players, and they significantly expanded map size to compensate for that vast increase in players. But the way they designed these maps and the way they designed these modes just didn't lend this doubling of players and expansion of map sizes to be something that's actually fun. I think there is a fun version of these modes out there, but they just, it felt like this game just wasn't given the time to really flesh out these dramatic changes that necessitate much more nuanced design considerations. And the end result is that many of the marquee features of Battlefield 2042 that hyped up things like the doubling of players from 64 to 128 and the expansive map sizes, a lot of the modes that focused on those elements were scrapped entirely, and they're essentially now trying to dial things back for Battlefield 2042 to feel like more of a traditional Battlefield game instead of this, whatever they were going for with 2042, some kind of hybrid between Battlefield and sort of more trending IPs like Call of Duty Warzone and Apex Legends and all these formats that just aren't suitable for the Battlefield experience that fans are looking forward to. If fans wanted to play Call of Duty Warzone or Apex Legends or Overwatch or any of the games that Battlefield 2042 seems to have taken inspiration from, they'd have just decided to tune into those games. But by leaning into trends instead of what makes Battlefield special, 2042 really shot itself in the foot and ended up alienating its community and fan base, and ended up designing a version of those more trending games that just isn't as good as those games. In fact, it's just broken in so many ways, technically and design-wise. Everything that could have gone wrong with 2042 did in fact go wrong, essentially. Video Games Chronicle released an article briefly summarizing the woes surrounding Battlefield 2042's launch. The game has received criticism from players for a lack of compelling maps, a redesign of the classic Battlefield class system, and a lack of consistent, substantial updates. Now, CEO Andrew Wilson did admit that the game had performance issues, but tried to downplay all of the other issues that stretched far beyond performance. He said, "We launch with strong stability." That's a statement that can certainly be called into question. However, as more players experienced the full game, it became clear that there were unanticipated performance issues that we would need to address. Performance issues only scratched the surface of the technical issues surrounding Battlefield 2042. There are plenty of compilation videos out there showing strange behavior of guns, strange behavior of player mobility, strange behavior of melee attacks, players clipping through walls, strange behavior of vehicles. There's the hovercraft that I think I saw scale a wall and like fly like a helicopter, and I think it crashed into a helicopter and it beat the helicopter. So that was an OP vehicle right there, you know, for unintended reasons. All kinds of like amusing to look at but frustrating to play technical issues that plague the game that made the performance issues look tame. Vince Zampella, who is head of Respawn Entertainment, one of the few good EA studios, and who was recently assigned as essentially head of Battlefield, he came out and admitted that Battlefield 2042 did lose the Battlefield identity, and this was something that Video Games Chronicle reported 2 months ago on September of 2022, when Vince Zampella said, "I think they just strayed a little too far from what Battlefield is. They tried to do a couple of things that were maybe ambitious, grow the player count, etc. I don't think they spent enough time iterating on what makes that fun." I 100% agree with that statement. I think there is a version of Battlefield 2042 out there with the 128 players, with the expanded maps, that is good. But with 2042, they made some misguided choices alongside just not having enough time to flesh out what a difference that expansion of players and map size makes. What they're going for now is just scaling things back and kind of going back to playing it safe in an attempt to preserve Battlefield 2042 as much as they can, though given that players are still just migrating to Battlefield 1, it doesn't look like Battlefield 2042 has much of a chance, though there are upcoming updates like the Season 3 update, which will bring the game closer to something that will feel more familiar to players of previous series entries. They're planning to introduce a class system with the Season 3 update, so we'll see if that will have enough of an impact to convince players to dive back into 2042 instead of just going back to Battlefield 1. But yeah, the optics surrounding 2042 are bad enough that I'm apprehensive about believing that it can make some kind of major comeback, though EA and DICE seem dedicated to working on the game. They don't seem to be entirely giving up on it. They do seem to want to overhaul this game. We'll see if they succeed with this endeavor. But Zampella continued, "It's not inherently a bad idea. The stuff that they came up with for 2042, the changes that they made, the way they expanded player count and map size and all these things, the way they were set up and the way they executed just didn't allow them to find the best thing possible." And then finally, in regards to Zampella becoming the new overseer of the Battlefield franchise, he said, "It's a whole new structure. We're putting multiple studios together. We're bringing the best talent together and giving them the time to do something amazing." That's one of the things that major publishers like EA fail to give developers: time to really make the game as best as it can be. They've gone away so much with releasing and shipping unpolished, unfinished video games that they made tons of money out of anyway, that they figured, we can just keep doing this. But with 2042, it really ended up biting them in the butt. So hopefully, whatever restructurings Zampella has done here and whatever changes they've made to the development pipelines and infrastructures will ensure that future Battlefield games feel complete and launch in a technical state that feels like it meets certain quality standards that many EA launches have failed to meet as of late. In the meantime, though, let this serve as a lesson to game publishers out there who think they can continue to get away with those half-baked, unpolished launches for the long term, that eventually there will be a straw that will break the camel's back, and in the case of Battlefield 2042 was not the straw, the tree trunk that fell on the camel's back and utterly shattered it. And there's no better indicator of this than the way the majority of Battlefield players are completely disinterested in the latest entry versus the 5 years older entry that has a pretty healthy looking player base. And in fact, this 24-hour peak has become the new all-time peak for Battlefield 1 on Steam, which further highlights how disillusioned players are by 2042 and are itching for a proper Battlefield experience and are going back to better, older entries to scratch that itch. Imagine your latest entry being so bad that your old entry garners record players on Steam and surpasses its initial all-time peak numbers. That's how dire things are for 2042. And hopefully just the Battlefield franchise can, just get its shit together for future entries, and EA can start to learn from their mistakes. But there you have it, folks. That's the latest on Battlefield 2042 and its current state when it comes to sentiments and player numbers and engagement. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the future of Battlefield 2042. Do you think it's done, or do you think there's the possibility of it making a comeback under Vince Zampela's leadership and their plans to overhaul things like the specialist system to be more in line with the class system of old, and essentially trying to course correct a very misguided latest entry? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.